No Sleep Reddit, Crazy Ex Scary Stories. Story 1. How my boyfriend's now husband ex was stalking him. So when my husband and I were dating, we reached the point where we decided to live together. Got married about 4 months after that. He lived in an apartment about 30 minutes from mine. He had not lived there for about 2 months but had to keep paying rent for it because of the lease. So he would go to the apartment leasing office informing them that he wasn't going to renew the lease and he would be gone soon. A few days after this, his ex calls him and asks where he is moving to. Mind you, they hadn't spoken for months at this point. He saw her call him and answer the phone as he was super surprised as to what on earth could she possibly want. He told her that it wasn't any of her business where he was going to. She proceeded to tell him that she was just checking up on him and had apparently gone to the apartment complex, presenting herself as a friend, and the leasing office employee had told her that he was no longer living at the apartment and was planning to move out soon. I was so mind blown that they had shared anything about my partner to his ex. I mean, there's a big confidentiality violation right there. She also said wishing you well in your future endeavors, something generic like this. I was beyond pissed. My partner / boyfriend told me that he saw her car near his work a couple times, but didn't see her. She did leave him alone after this, but my partner had to cut off contact with some of their mutual friends and acquaintances, as he didn't want her keeping tabs on him. I'm so glad this didn't escalate into anything. She was clearly controlling, and in the back of her mind, it was okay for her to still somehow get a hold of his life. Update: I forgot to include something important. So before my boyfriend moved in with me, and I was still living at his apartment, he had a strange feeling of being followed. There was even this car near where he used to park. He had no idea who it belonged to. I personally think that his ex drove to his place several times while he was already moved in with me, didn't see his car, panicked, and went inquiring about him at the complex. That's the only reason she would inquire about him later, since there was no sign of him at the residence. This also explained his feeling of being followed was probably right also. She then had the nerve to look for him after they hadn't seen each other or spoken to each other for a while. Also, she had started dating this man. I think she started talking to him while her and my partner were still together, a week after their breakup, and called my boyfriend not a real man behind his back. So yeah, she was pissed off. There was nothing really friendly about her to empathize with, just a control freak looking for attention. Story 2. My mom's ex-boyfriend broke into our house with a gun and almost killed her. Before my mom married my dad, she dated a man named Craig. At first, he was sweet, but he slowly became abusive. My mom tried to leave multiple times, but Craig always threatened her. After one violent argument, my mom waited and fled in the middle of the night. Years passed and she got married and had me. My dad's work included a lot of traveling, so it was mostly my mom and I alone in our big Acreage home. My mom was in the kitchen making lasagna while I was sitting in my high chair. It was extremely hot that day, so she opened up the kitchen door to let in some air. She heard heavy footsteps enter into the kitchen behind her. My excited mom assumed it was my dad, and she turned around with a "Hello, my love." Her excitement immediately turned to horror. There was Craig standing in the middle of our kitchen with a gun visibly tucked into his pants. Craig smiled at her and asked what she was making. My mom mustered up enough courage and said lasagna. She was physically shaking as Craig sat himself down beside me. He was playfully pinching my cheek, and I laughed at him. My mom was holding back tears as she finally asked what he was doing in the house. Craig said he wanted to visit my mom and that he would leave when he was done eating. When the lasagna was ready, she served it to him. My mom took me and sat across from Craig so she could keep an eye on him. Craig said he still had her things at his house and she was welcome to get them. My mom said she didn't need any of it and he could throw it out. Craig started to get agitated and said she threw him away like garbage too. Craig said she was acting tough, but he knew deep inside she was still the stupid girl he had dated. Craig claimed that my mom needed him in her life and that she couldn't function if he wasn't there to help her. He said he needed to be there to raise me because my dad was a faggot who would never be able to protect my mom and I. Craig said if he was crazy, he would have easily kidnapped us and done things to my mom because my dad was a pussy who couldn't protect what was his. My mom started to cry and told Craig to leave the house. Craig said that it wasn't her house and that he had all the right to be there. My mom said if he didn't leave, she would call the police, which really made him angry. Craig threatened if the cops got involved, he would hire men to cut her up into pieces and film it. My mom started to cry even louder, and an agitated Craig threw his plate and yelled at her to stop crying. crying and that he loved her. I got scared and started to cry too, which caused Craig to stand up and approach my mom. She jumped out of her chair with me cradled in her arms. She begged Craig to spare my life. Craig tried to reach over to touch my mom, but she got so scared that she fell to the floor sobbing. The phone began to ring and Craig became so overwhelmed that he ran out of the house. The cops and his family found him about to shoot himself in the head. His adult son had to convince him not to do it. My mom was so traumatized that she didn't want to deal with any of it, so she got a restraining order against him. Her and my dad moved across the country. I was curious and searched the guy up and was shocked to see that he was dating a college-age girl who looked just like the woman he couldn't have. Story 3. Creepy night with my ex and his best friend. So this happened in my very first relationship. I was almost 21 at the time when I met my ex. Never had been kissed, never had been on a date, but somehow I got myself into a relationship with this guy that had helped me with my studying for one of my tests a few years ago. Looking back, the relationship itself also was full of major red flags. I don't want to go into detail because it's not the point of the story. But essentially, he sometimes told me, "I wish I could rape you." Bear in mind that he first told me that a few days after I had my first time with him. He also always laughed and smiled creepily when women in movies were beaten up, murdered, or raped. When he saw such scenes, he always smiled creepily and told me, "This is a nice scene," etc. He told me he liked the look of beaten up women. I had the biggest pink colored glasses on and thought these things were jokes. One evening, when I met him, he asked if we could meet a friend of his. I told him of course because I had never met any of his friends before. So we drove to his friend's flat. Everything was good. When I was there, they immediately got their shisha, some kind of water smoking device, no drugs included, and lots of alcohol ready. My ex knew I never drank, but he begged me to do it this one time for him, so I did. It was this kind of extremely sweet strawberry tasting alcohol in an extremely huge bottle. We sat and talked, smoked the shisha, and drank. Well, I drank. Recalling the night, my ex and his best friend only had one drink, but once my glass was empty, they immediately put more liquor in it and told me to drink more. I don't know why, but I did. At that time, I didn't really think about them still being on their first drink, while I had already finished my third or fourth or even fifth. I was getting drunk and also feeling extremely unwell. The friend of my ex told me to take off my hoodie, which I did. Thankfully, I had a top underneath, and once I did, he complimented me on my bomb-ass body, that I shouldn't come here dressed like that. He touched me by my neck and shoulders and tried to flirt with me while my ex was right there, still always giving me more and more liquor. I tried to get away from him, but he got closer again and tried to play with my hair. I was very uncomfortable, but already so drunk that I didn't tell him to piss off. Then my ex and the friend got up and were talking about something in the corner of the room. My ex came back, and for about 30 minutes, the friend of my ex was nowhere to be seen. My ex began making out with my drunk self. He tried to undress me, but I denied, telling him that I was on my period, which was true. Once I told him that, I could see that he was upset and almost slightly angry. He got up and got his friend, talking to him again, but this time I could see that the two were looking kind of frustrated. I know that almost immediately after that, my ex and I went to my ex's flat because we were told to go. After that, I could only remember the morning. My ex told me jokingly that I had passed out right before the bed. I had the worst headache I ever experienced. I had my ex to go and give me a bucket because my stomach turned and I had to puke so badly. I called my mom to pick me up. While waiting, my ex told me sitting on the bed that his friend would want to fuck me so badly. And again, you know that I have a fantasy of raping you. Then my mom picked me up. When I was home, I surely passed out in the bathroom, but after that I recovered. My ex mentioned the things about his friend wanting to fuck me a few times after that and asked me right after he could give him my number. A few months after our breakup, his friend sent me a message on Facebook saying he wanted to meet me. Looking back, I'm pretty sure that those two wanted to get me so drunk that I had no more control and then both have sex with me. The only thing that got in their way was my period. It was such a creepy evening that all the things that happened with my ex after that led me to believe that. I, for example, recall a time when there were news in our country about a very drunk girl being raped by two men, and he always said she was drunk. They did nothing, she wanted it. It's just sad that my pink colored glasses didn't let me see that when we were still together. I should have run away immediately after he told me first about his rape fantasies. But on the happy note, I now have a boyfriend that treats me like I'm the most wonderful person on earth. So, thanks period.